Welcome everyone. This is the Olathe Chamber of Commerce Business Lunch Series number 2. It's actually our first virtual event. So hopefully you kind of become accustomed to these, as we've all have in this last couple of months of doing more Zoom calls. But hopefully you've been know what's going to happen. But again, today is our Business Lunch Series. It's based on the travel industry road to recovery. I think a lot of us, when our panel met months ago to talk about this, we were going to speak on how to create a destination. But with the past 2 months, we've had to recreate a new topic, and we're going to try to be more highlighted and talk more positive and do some glass half full, talk about how the industry is going to come back. So a little more lighthearted, but not as dark as probably some of the meetings that a lot of our hospitality partners have been on lately, but definitely going to be more positive and kind of move forward with that. So first of all, again, I am Kelly Peetham. I'm the Vice President of the Olathe Convention and Visitors Bureau. We'd like to first of all start to thank our sponsors, Johnson County Community College and Enterprise Bank. I'd like to thank them for being our sponsors for this Business Lunch Series number 2. Again, like I mentioned, the title for our event today is the Travel Industry Road to Recovery. We thought this was pretty relevant in today's era. I know a lot of the Business Lunch Series kind of focus on economic development, but tourism, as we know, is more of an economic driver. And we really want to kind of emphasize that to the community, to the region of things that's going to be taking place for this industry and how we can kind of move forward. And today we have a good group of panelists that are going to kind of talk everything from state level to the large city level, and then also to an events level. So I think we have a great panel. I'm going to kind of start the webinar off a little bit to talk about if you are in the industry, you kind of know how it's been devastated, but just for others who don't know a whole lot about what's happened to the tourism industry, right now, is where the total economy kind of sees himself in a recession. The travel industry is really kind of in a depression right now. In the 1930s, the unemployment level was 25%. The unemployment level right now in the travel industry is actually 50+%. So that's worse than Depression era numbers. It's also kind of difficult to kind of compare it to 9/11, whereas a lot of the people in our industry look back as that is the time that was really kind of our worst times that we look back at. But if we look through U.S. travel numbers, we are actually 9 times worse than we were back in 9/11. So, the industry is in a place where it's never been before. It's a very like a historical industry with a lot of character, a lot of history, and it's really a struggle for a lot of us to see this happening to our business, and the devastation that's happened overall. Kind of if you're looking at more of like a GDP number, our industry is actually like $147 billion with the GDP impact, and it impacts 103 million jobs nationwide. So you can kind of see why we want to talk about the highlights of all this and why we want to improve everything. So kind of for you locally in Olathe, kind of our bottom we see was April. Our hotels were running about 18% occupancy. 3 of our hotels were closed. In May, we moved up to about 22% occupancy. And then right now, June, we're kind of trending at about high 30, maybe even to the 40% occupancy. So starting to see some recovery, but still, that's really all due to a lot of amateur sports. The business traveler and the group travelers have not returned here in Olathe, but we're trying to do a few things for that. So we'll kind of talk about that as we go forward. But probably enough of hearing me speak, and kind of let's get our experts involved a little bit. So I'm going to introduce our panel, and then we're going to kind of go from there. Our first panelist is Bridgette Jones. She's the State Director of Tourism. So she's going to go off first, but I'm going to introduce the total panel here real quick. You got Nathan Hermiston he's the Vice President, let me get this right, Senior Vice President of Convention Sales and Services. I know that's kind of a mouthful. I always think mine's kind of a mouthful. And then we have Mike Sharpe, Director of Business Development for the Kansas City Sports Commission. So a good panel is going to kind of talk on all dimensions of tour and travel, not only locally, but in the metro, and then kind of regionally as well, and statewide as well. So what I'm going to do is kind of pass it off to Bridgette first, and kind of let her talk on a state level of the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, and then kind of some things that are going on with her.
All right, thank you, Kelly. I'm really pleased to be here and talk with you all from Olathe. I've been in my position as the State Director of Tourism for almost a year now. And as you know, in any new position, it's always a challenge. during your first year, and there's always a big learning curve, but throwing in a worldwide pandemic definitely did put an interesting twist on this experience. It is challenging when your job is to encourage travel when travel really isn't an option. And that's what our industry has been faced with over the last few months. Our mission at Kansas Tourism is to inspire travel to and throughout Kansas. And that has been difficult to do when travel is not possible, or at least strongly discouraged. I've said this on several webinars. There's probably two words that I've used more often in these last few months than any other time in my life, and those words are unprecedented and pivot. The pandemic created an unprecedented effect on the travel and tourism industry worldwide, in the US and definitely in Kansas. And not only have we had to learn to pivot in our work and personal lives, but for those of us in a travel marketing organization, we have had to learn to pivot literally in everything that we do. So I want to talk a second just about what the effects of the pandemic have been on the Kansas tourism industry. Some of the ways that we monitor the health of the tourism industry is with data on visitation numbers, economic impact, hotel lodging data, transient guest tax, and other sales tax data. And one of the outside companies that we use uses geolocation and consumer spending data. And we know from that our out-of-state visitation to Kansas this year started off very well in the first 2 months of 2020. In fact, it was performing higher level than the previous 2 years. And about the second week of March, literally the bottom dropped out. By March 20th, out-of-state visitation had dropped to unprecedented levels, and it stayed there until about mid-May, when we started seeing a very slow but gradual increase in visitors. For in-state travelers who were willing to travel more than 50 miles from home, we did start seeing that gradual increase about a month earlier, around the 20th of April. We also saw those trends reflected in the collection of the transient guest tax, or the hotel tax. Although we are not funded at the State Tourism Division by this tax, your local CVBs, such as yours in Olathe, are funded by the tax. Kansas Department of Revenue shows that the collection for the entire state show an almost 31% decrease in collections January through May of 2020 over 2019. Some months were hit a lot harder than others. The month of May in collections showed a 73% decrease in collections. We were really fortunate to have those really good months in January and February that softened it overall just a bit. And I will mention that those percentage decreases are statewide collections. So we have some communities in Kansas that were hit much harder than others. Smith Travel Research, or STR, is a leader in monitoring hotel occupancy rates and revenue, and they have stated that April of 2020 was the worst single month ever for hotels in the US. So the data that I'm talking about is backing up what you already know. We've seen statewide major budget cuts at local DMOs. They're having multiple furloughs and layoffs and drastic cutbacks on their marketing efforts. So that's the bad news. There is some good news. In all of our data, we are starting to see travel to and throughout Kansas begin again. It's very slow. Travelers are not going far from home. Wide open spaces are what people are looking for, and I believe that positions Kansas very well. We just happen to have a lot of those. In fact, Kansas state parks throughout this pandemic are having some of the best attendance records in years. Our campgrounds are full. We're seeing both Kansans and out-of-state travelers visiting sites and doing activities in Kansas that they've never thought of before. There is a general sense of uncertainty about the future, and there's a lot of discussion about when will the traveler be ready to travel again. I know that you're probably having those discussions with your family. I know I'm having them with mine. So traveler confidence is a very important key right now to the travel industry. We know that travelers want to visit places that they are confident in the cleaning and the safety protocols. And another part of this discussion, honestly, is making sure that local residents are ready to welcome travelers again to their community. So I think in the near future, we're going to see people traveling closer to home. At Kansas Tourism, we're planning for more in-state marketing than I would have ever imagined. Visitors are going to be traveling by car. It's kind of that resurgence of the family vacation that I grew up. And it's not really a surprise that leisure travelers coming back first. On the other hand, the meeting industry, and I know Nathan's going to talk about that, it's a real challenge. And I think it's going to take some time for meetings and conventions to come back. We're going to see smaller sizes and enhanced protocols. But the travel industry relies very heavily in Kansas on that business and convention travel. So it's one we're following closely. So I think with that, I'm going to stop and Kelly, turn it back over to you.
All right, thank you, Bridgette. And if you want to start, there's the Q&A or a chat box. If you want to start putting in some questions, once we're all kind of summarizing, we're gonna move to a Q&A. So if anybody's listening wants to do that, please begin that as well. So I'm going to hand it off to Nathan. He's going to kind of talk a little bit more about Kansas City and the metro, and then some of the bigger city issues.
Thanks, Kelly. I appreciate it. Again, Nathan Hermiston, Senior Vice President of Convention Sales and Services for VisitKC. We are the Convention Visitors Bureau for Kansas City. Primarily, as Bridgette had mentioned, I'm going to touch a little bit more on the meetings and conventions sector and some of the work that we're doing there. But echoing what has been said, I won't belabor the statistics. I'll give you a couple of them that are interesting interesting or depressing, however you want to look at it. From a meetings and conventions standpoint, we've had over 100 groups, meetings and conventions canceled this year. That represents about 218,000 room nights that would have been otherwise occupied in our market. We also have 56 groups that we're actively working with to reschedule. That represents about 58,000 room nights that would have otherwise have actualized. All told, well over a $200 million total economic impact from a financial standpoint. And that's more, and there's more to come. 2020 is for all intents and purposes, Bridgette had mentioned the meetings and conventions business is going to take a while to recover. There's a lot of psychological components to that. There's a lot of business components to that. A lot of budgets have been cut. Obviously a lot of, there's hardly one sector of any of the economy that has not been dramatically impacted by this. And obviously travel, business travel is tied to a lot of those performances. We average about 300 events a year. We've, and as I was mentioned before, over 160 of those events have already either been canceled or rescheduled. And again, we have more to come. So we have a long road to recovery. That being said, we are starting to see some events. Speaking with some of our hoteliers here in the market, the big full service properties down here, they are starting to hold events. Two of our hotels actually have meetings in-house right now of over 100 people. That's a big deal right now. So let's get excited. That's good. That's recovery. These are hotels that are used to hosting 1,000 person, 2,000 person conferences. But from a staffing level, the unemployment, as Kelly had mentioned, we don't have the staffing right now. So it is all hands on deck to host 100 person, 200 person meetings right now. That's just the economies of scale that we're dealing with right now. So I mentioned, the meetings and convention business is very, it's a struggling thing. But again, we're going to be really focused until there's a vaccine. We are going to be focused on the small meetings market and the local and regional meetings market. So a lot of you on the call right now, or that are in attendance right now, it's your local meetings. It's keeping meetings closer. It's keeping them smaller. Really trying to drive that awareness that there is a need for in-person meetings. And I think we can all agree on that. The quarantine has definitely, in our opinion, has heightened that excitement for in-person meetings. I was in a 10-person meeting about 2 weeks ago, and I couldn't believe how excited we all were to be in the same room together, albeit appropriately socially distanced. So again, until there's a vaccine, really the primary business will be that small meetings and local meetings market. So again, keep those meetings local, keep them going. And obviously there's a lot of protocols that go along with that. So those are things that we're working on. One thing that we're doing in Kansas City, and again, as we start to look at recovery in the group business, is and hopefully you'll be seeing this week. It's actually on the docket for adoption at the city council level. Is VisitKC has headed up the KC Clean Commitment, and really is going to be it's going to be us providing the guidelines to the city, to our stakeholders, and to our customers, showing that Kansas City's ready. We have the guidelines in place, we have the protocols in place, and really we're trying to build a little bit of consumer confidence. We completely understand that just because people are going to be allowed to travel does not mean they're going to be allowed. That does not mean they're going to travel. There are a lot of other issues out there, secondary issues that are going to prohibit that. We completely understand. That being said, we're going to be ready when they're ready. So hopefully you'll start seeing a little bit more of that out in the media here in the coming days, about as Kansas City and the meetings and convention side of things start to open up. And again, just want to touch on from an occupancy standpoint. Pre-COVID, we were running about 65% occupancy region wide. That's taking into account the airport, the downtown, the greater Kansas City area, of which obviously Olathe is part of. Right now, we're in that 15 to 20% range region wide. So kudos, Kelly. You guys are doing a great job. You've cleared 30%, almost 40%. So great job. We are not quite there in downtown yet, but again, being a little bit more focused on the business side, that's to be expected. So, and Kelly had mentioned, and Bridgette had too, heavy focus on leisure travel. The one thing that I'm sure all the statistics that Bridgette's looking at as well is the demand is there. There is the desire to travel. It just has to be smart. It's going to be scaled down accordingly. So again, that 50-mile drive radius, that 100-mile drive radius, we're doing more local marketing than we've ever done before, because that's where we're at, and we understand that's the reality of where we're at right now. So. Those are my brief comments. I've cleared my 5-minute mark, so I will turn it back over to Kelly, and I look forward to hearing what Mike has to say.
All right. Nathan, thanks so much for your insight there. And we're going to move on to Mike Sharpe at the Kansas City Sports Commission, and let's see what he has to talk about sports and events and things.
All right. Well, thanks, Kelly. I appreciate being a part of the Olathe Chamber of Business Lunch Series. I've been with the Kansas City Sports Commission now for 7 years this summer, and the Kansas City Sports Commission is we're a standalone nonprofit. We are completely and totally dependent upon events that we own and operate, as well as events that we co-host, and generally those are national events that we co-host. Honestly, 2020 started out great. I mean, if we step back and think about it for a second, 2020 was a phenomenal start. I mean, the Chiefs win the Super Bowl, and that was wonderful for our region. We had the opportunity, the tremendous honor to host the parade and put on the parade for the Chiefs on February 5th. We hosted one of our largest events, the Win for KC Luncheon, which featured three-time Olympian Natalie Kaufman. We had over 2,000 people attend in the Grand Ballroom at the Convention Center. And after that event finished in early February, we rolled right into planning for the arrival of the Big 12 basketball championship in early March. And in addition to welcoming the men back, we were welcoming the women back for the first time since 2012. And what was going to be so tremendous for our community was this is the first time that both the men and women had been hosted in the same city at the same time. So we were very much looking forward to that opportunity. And then all of a sudden, it all changed. Bridgette mentioned Wednesday, March 11th, at the Big 12 tournament, when it was announced that the tournament was going to be discontinued on Thursday the 12th. And that really, it knocked us back. I think that decision knocked a lot of people back to start thinking about what was going to be happening nationally. So as I said earlier, we're dependent upon events that we host and co-host. And so losing the Big 12 tournament was a big financial setback for us. We host a 5K, 12K run the day of the championship game for the men's tournament on that Saturday. That event, which normally has about 1,500 participants, we had to, using Bridgette's term, we had to pivot very quickly, and we had to move that event to a virtual run, and lost over half of the participants that had actually signed up for it. So again, a direct impact on our organization. And then we began to see the dominoes fall. The NCAA tournament was canceled. All of the NAIA tournament was canceled. All of the NCAA and NAIA championships through the spring and all of the junior college championships through the spring were canceled. So it was a time then for our organization to kind of catch our breath, refocus our efforts in our planning and figure out what we were going to be able to do moving forward, not knowing what was going to be there. We were planning and had planned to host the Kansas City Triathlon in mid-May. We had to reschedule that. It is now scheduled for late August, and we're holding out hope that that can still occur. Again, because we own that event, it's a revenue generator for us in our organization. Our Camp Win for KC, Camp Win for Girls summer camp. It's a hugely successful camp. Generally, it's 3 weeks with over 900 participants, and we had to adjust, and that is now being done online in a virtual format, and we're serving about 250 campers through that. We moved our in-person Kansas City Sports Awards banquet. Normally we have about 800 participants come and dine and drink and entertain with each other. We were very fortunate that we converted that to a televised opportunity with the local NBC affiliate, and hosted that on TV June 12th and 13th, and felt like that actually ended up being a nice event for us. Nathan will know this as well. We were planning to host our National Association of Sports Commissions National Convention in Kansas City in early April. And we'd worked years to get our National Association to bring their convention to our community. Of all of our peers, or over 1,000 of our peers and event owners, to Kansas City to learn what Kansas City in our region has to offer. And that event, unfortunately, was canceled. We have been able to renegotiate, and they're going to bring the event back in 2023. But that was something else that we had lost out on that we had been planning for a long time to host as well. So, where do we go from here, and how are we recovering as an organization is that, obviously we all miss sports. And the question now is, when is the right time to bring them back? We have to adhere to national, state, county, and city guidelines with these events, as well as the guidelines that the event owners have for their own events that they want to bring in. We're working to be very creative, to help our organization, to provide any type of engagement opportunities for members of the community, whether it's to participate or spectate or even celebrate, like our awards banquet, sport, because we do miss it so much. We have actually created a brand new event. It's a virtual run for runners in the Kansas City area, where they have an opportunity to run by iconic landmarks in the community. We hope that they'll take selfies and post them and just try to get people to be out and be active around that. We're creating a new golf event to try to help folks be active and get out and see each other, and again, try to generate a little revenue for our organization. We have created the Kansas City Esports Coalition, which is an online gaming. I'm not a gamer, but we are working with the gaming community to try to figure out how we make esports bigger for our community. And we've already actually hosted our first event, which was a fundraiser for COVID relief efforts here in the Kansas City area. We are holding out hope, knocking on wood, that we'll be able to host the 2020 Garmin Kansas City Marathon on October 17th. That's by far and away our largest fundraising event that we do for our organization. and we're keeping our fingers crossed on that. While all of that has continued to happen, where we try to figure out different ways to move about doing things, we continue to work on things for the community for the future. Obviously, we're very proud and excited to be planning and working on hosting the 2023 NFL Draft for Kansas City. I think it'll be a great opportunity for us to showcase our community. We are deep into planning in the 2026 World Cup bid, getting ready to go into some workshops and learn a little bit more about that process, being one of the final cities to hopefully be selected for that. And then in late October, we will find out which of our 30-some bids that we submitted to the NCAA will be accepted and awarded to Kansas City for NCAA championships for the academic years 22-23 through 25-26. So we still have a lot going on. It's just a little different now. So that's kind of a recap for the Sports Commission, Kelly.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. That's a lot of good information. I know I'm a big sports buff, so I'd like to hear some of that, but sad to hear that we lost so much too as a region for that. That's one of the things in Olathe that we do see coming back. We have amateur sports. That's really what's driving us now. Just a little bit of corporate business, but yes, that's been our big push right now is amateur sports. So thanks for all those people doing their sportscations here in Johnson County. So we actually have quite a few questions coming up, and actually a couple of them look maybe kind of difficult. The first one I'm actually going to open it up to everyone, but somebody that's in a K-State Olathe actually has a hospitality program, and a bachelor's degree that's focused on tourism and lodging. Is there any advice that you would give for students that are coming into that industry? Is your opinion that the job outlook in the industry is changing? Does anybody want to take that one? That's I know I have a hospitality degree.
I'll jump.
Go, Nathan.
Yeah, there is going to be opportunity. This has created a lot of, I won't even call it turnover. Just there's going to be a lot of change in the hospitality careers, be it hotels, be it restaurants, be it event space, be it whatever, wherever that should be. And we've already seen we're at the bottom, and I would say we're even coming out of the bottom. So you are seeing places open back up. You are seeing places reimagine how they're going to be operating. And I would say somebody coming fresh into the industry right now is probably better positioned than someone who's been in the industry like myself for 15 or 20 years, because change is hard, and we all have to do things completely different than the way we were used to doing things. And I think you're going to see the new wave of professionals coming into this industry hit the ground running, for lack of better words, where you're going to see, somebody like me who's going to be tripping over themselves trying to, adjust to the new normal. So I think it's not a great time. I mean, I'm not going to say that there's going to be jobs plentiful right now, but I am optimistic. I would be bullish on the future of careers in hospitality, because hospitality's always been a hustle career. If you're a hustler, you will succeed in this industry, and I think it's a great time. I think in the future the career outlook is good.
I would just concur with that. I think it's very true that, like Nathan hit on something that probably will be another question for us, is that what are we repositioning ourselves to be different as a DMO, or as a CVB? We definitely are having to relook at what our measurables are and how we are changing. So yeah, that market, I think the job market's going to be strong. It's just like you said, Nathan said, that come in, be willing to change. You have a bunch of new ideas that probably will all stick pretty quick. So I would definitely have someone focus on that. This one question for Bridgette. Is the industry reaching more of any ag tourism marketing, more activities, for farmers, growers, stuff like that? Is that and maybe something that's kind of a new thing that's come approach?
It is definitely. We manage at the Kansas Agritourism program. We manage that through Kansas Tourism. And it's one of the areas that you will see we will be talking about more and more. I mentioned when I was talking a few minutes ago, people are looking for wide open spaces. You know, how many times have we talked about people are wanting to go out and buy beef now from the actual producer, not actually going to the store? That's been a big topic of conversation. So I think that we are seeing people going back to a little bit of a simpler time. I don't know if that's simpler, but I think people think it is. And so they are very interested in those types of experiences. So yes, our marketing moving forward will definitely look on about Kansas agriculture and about ways that visitors can experience and have some type of educational experience at those facilities. So yes.
Yeah, I know I've bought from a local farmer for our beef too, so I think a lot of people do that. Hey, here's a question from Mike actually, and since we got the news, was it yesterday or this morning, that the baseball season will be back, although 60 games, which doesn't seem like a lot. I guess they're going to play them regionally, which, I mean, Bettis needs in the division, but what's it going to look like when we go to a game? That's the question. What's it going to be? What's the stadium going to be? Are we going to have to be quarantined before we go in, or what's going to happen?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. You know, I think it's just, I think Nathan had actually mentioned on it earlier, is that the unknown is, will fans come back? And especially before a vaccine is available. You know, will fans be comfortable attending they might be more comfortable attending an outdoor event than maybe an indoor event. So your outdoor events, baseball, soccer, football, whatever that might be, versus an indoor event of basketball, volleyball, a musical concert, a theater performance, things like that. I think we'll see a series of seating strategies implemented by the facilities that might limit the number of individuals that attend or can attend an event based on rows and sections and things like that. I think, you know, you think about seating at an event, but as an events person, you think about everything else outside of just the competition itself. So you start thinking about, okay, what are the concession stand lines going to look like? What are the restroom lines going to look like? How are the ingress into the venue going to look, and the egress, the leaving the venue, going to look? All of those are things that are going to be, you know, scrutinized and evaluated. And I think the CDC has come out with some guidelines on that already. And I know right here in Kansas City, there was a nice article in the Kansas City paper last week, maybe, about how the local sport architecture firms are evaluating so much of that and trying to help the venues that might be hosting these events in the future. So, you know, again, the only known is the unknown. So we'll just kind of have to wait and see how that works out.
That is true. That's good to know, because I'm curious. I don't know. Will I go to a Royals game? I don't know. I mean, I'd love to. But we'll definitely check it out and see. Kind of more of a business question, maybe for Nathan. You know, a lot of us have really planned, or we're pleased to see that we're building a new airport here in town. Has this had any effect on that? Do you know? And, you know, maybe any other projects that you might think of? And, you know, what does that mean for Kansas City?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to touch on that in my original comments, but I was hoping it come up in a question. I'll give a quick overview. I think a lot of this has been communicated through the media as well, but the airport construction is on time. It's still on track. It has, from what has been communicated to us publicly and privately, the pandemic has not had an impact on the construction. That is great news. Still on track to be open and fully functioning by early 2023, in time for that NFL draft that Mike's still working on. So, and I think maybe this is a silver lining. I mean, we're grasping at straws here, but, you know, for the next year or two, it is going to be a heavy focus on this local, you know, regional focus on leisure and meetings and conventions. And, you know, one thing that we're doing here in Kansas City is really highlighting the fact that we are the heart of the country. We're an easy city to drive to. We're an affordable city to get to. We have ample opportunities. We have a great cross section of, you know, of space, wide open spaces, as Bridgette was talking about. So we are a city that we feel is as best positioned as we can be for what we are, to capitalize on those opportunities. I was on a webinar about 3 weeks ago with all the CEOs of the 6 big major hotel brands: Hilton, Hyatt, Marriott, Best Western, Accor, et cetera. And they're not expecting full recovery pre-COVID, occupancies to come back until 2022 or 2022 is about the earliest. So I look at that with that early 2023 with the airport saying, when we're back to full capacity, which we all hope we will be, and we're all confident that we will be, Kansas City is going to be really ready to go, because now we're going to have a new airport to even become a more attractive destination. So we're excited about that. We're, obviously air traffic volume is down, but in speaking with the officials out at the airport, and as you're reading in the media, the airlines are adding routes back. So July is going to be bigger than June. August is going to be bigger than July, and they're even anticipating being almost back to normal from a route capacity standpoint by fall. So that could be all, trying to drive speculation through the market. We'll see, but the airlines are bullish, so that makes us happy. So
that's good news. Yeah, I'm kind of waiting to see that airport. I've always, I've been in this industry for quite a while in Kansas City, and always wanting to see a new airport. So. All right, question for Bridgette. You get the hard questions, Bridgette. I know that you haven't been in there a super long time, but question really is based on funding for the state of Kansas. You mentioned, transient guest tax is what a lot of the CVBs and DMOs are paid with. But do you see any changes in the state budgets, maybe going forward? Maybe it might increase. I know as being the president of TIAC, I get to see a lot of your presentations, and I know it's challenging, and Kansas doesn't rate super high on funding, but do you see any changes with that in the future, maybe?
Sure. I saw that Richard Smalley posted this question. I love that coming from Richard. It is a great question. Kansas does have one of the smallest marketing budgets of any state in the U.S. And I say this to legislators, I say this to everyone. It's like operating with one hand tied behind my back, and sometimes I feel like it's both hands are tied behind my back, because my competition has a lot more money than we do. We had started, when I first came in about a year ago, we definitely started discussions at that point. We are funded, about 50% of our funding comes from EDIF, which is lottery funds. And the other half comes through partnerships that we have with other agencies, pub fees, but dollars that we raise. We're a little under $4 million is what we have to work with every year. And I think that puts us about 47th or 48th lowest. So the discussions have started, and we will be requesting, again, more EDIF funds. And I believe that is, they are to be used for economic development. And I think we can all make the case that tourism is an economic development driver. The other thing that we are looking at in the very near future is we have already thrown our hat into the ring on some CARES Act funding. There is, as you know, each state and the counties are getting some of the federal funds. And so we already have some proposals put together to help us recover from this pandemic, to be able to access some of those CARES Act dollars. I don't know what will happen with that, but they can only say no, so I'm going to always ask. But it is a huge problem that we have in Kansas, and it is something that we are aggressively going after in making it where we are at least on a level playing field with our competition.
Good information. So yeah, hopefully that helped out, because I know the EDIF thing always kind of throws me off. I'm like, oh, that's lottery money. So yeah, people don't really realize that you guys get funds from there as well. Now, here's a question that it's kind of be wrapped up, but it's a short question, but it's kind of tough to answer. But is there a new normal? Is there anything that I guess we would say? I guess we would kind of consider that as travel. And for me, I know that we've kind of hit on a few things with that about, if you check into a hotel, your temperature, you see now where the shields are up. If you have, buffet, if you're going to go to a hotel as a buffet, that probably is not a buffet. It's probably some kind of individualized food they'll hand you, or not even hand you, they'll actually be available for you. I've seen on a few of the things, Nathan might have seen this with the the big hotel chains, when you're walking in, how they can actually scan your temperature and everything. So I don't know, I think it's just going to be different. I don't know about the meetings world. Nathan was talking about this too in a meeting that, everybody's spread apart. Now, how can, the occupancies will change, and I think a lot of it goes with state, county, city, the guidelines from the government and how all that can be affected. But Mike kind of hit on it too about going to stadiums and, how that will be kind of either getting in, getting out, which I didn't really think about. But, can you sit at the stadium? I think what the Royal Stadium is a hold like a high 30s. Do they have to reduce that down to 15? I mean, I don't know. It's just the new normal is going to be very different. So I don't know if anybody else has any comments on that or can give some insight. So Nathan, you unmuted your line, so I don't know if you had.
I was going to allow Bridgette to go.
Okay. I'll start with that. I think what I would say is the new normal today is probably going to change next month and probably change the month after that. I think, again, that pivot, we have to be ready to pivot and be very ready to change and be responsive to changes. We don't know what's exactly going to happen with the virus this fall, so we have to be ready to change. We really, when the pandemic first hit, we changed our marketing message from "come here now" to "travel awaits." We're waiting for you. We'll be here when you're ready to travel. Now we've changed that marketing message again to "travel safely" or "safe travels." And so we're saying, go ahead and travel, but do it in a way that is safe and respectful to others. And so I think that would be the new normal right now, is safe travels.
Yeah, and I would agree. It's everyone's radar is up on safety, travel precautions, social distancing. I have weekly phone calls with a lot of my full service hotels, and dealing with these cancellations and these rebookings, and everybody wants to get back to the way it used to be, and obviously we've resigned ourselves to know that that's definitely not on the horizon. A couple things that I think, and I probably get my wrist slapped for admitting this. Unfortunately, I think we are going to see long term. I think we're going to see a lot of meetings and travel, that business travel specifically, that the day trips. The idea of jumping on a plane and flying to LA for a day meeting and then flying back maybe the next day. I think a lot of those are going to go away, unfortunately. I mean, I'm just because I'm selfish, because I think a lot of people are becoming much more comfortable with technology. That's just reality, and there's efficiencies and efficiencies of scale. I just don't. I see that being a long-term thing. I'm not saying it'll go away altogether, but that's going to have an impact on future occupancies and future demand and things like that. You are going to see that in the meetings and conventions business. For the next couple of years, as businesses recover, which again I think a lot of you on the call are probably experiencing too. Everybody's budget, every sector of the economy has been impacted by this one way or another. Mostly for bad, some for good. But again, I think travel budgets are definitely going to take a couple of years to recover. So from a meetings and convention standpoint, some of those conventions that maybe you used to attend, or those meetings you used to attend, maybe you'd send 4 or 5 people to. Now you might be only sending 2 or 3, or you're going every other year. So that's going to impact meeting attendance for the next couple of years, because it's going to take a couple of years for those budgets to come back. So, and overall, Bridgette was kind of touching on this, and she probably did. I'm just going to restate it. That psychologically, until people are ready to travel, that to me is the big thing, is we can come up with all the greatest precautions and safety guidelines and adhere to social distancing. If someone's not comfortable traveling right now, we can't make them, and that's okay. That's okay. But that's the biggest thing, is that psychological piece. And until that gets cleared, I don't know if that will ever be clear. So maybe that's the new normal, is psychologically where are people at their comfort level to travel.
That's definitely true. All right, let's get on something else, because we have a couple questions before we run out of time, but more from Mike. But you mentioned a lot of these tournaments and things, and what do you think on timing for that? Like, is NCAA, Big 12, is there any insight on, is it wait for a vaccine? Because Kansas City, there's a lot. I mean, the sports in certain, I mean, I know definitely in the spring and early that time area, we see a lot of sports, definitely from the volleyball tournaments, and not being selfish and going down and want to watch Big 12 basketball and all the other things. But do you see that timeline on that coming back, or?
I guess the answer, I don't know. I mean, I think we continue to see different phased-in approaches at all levels. We're seeing it now in various parts of the country with different approaches. And one of my favorite philosophers of all time, Yogi Berra, said you can observe a lot just by watching. So I think that's what we're going to see as these sports continue to come back and come back online, is that Olathe is going to watch how Overland Park handles an event. And then Overland Park's going to watch how Kansas City, Kansas handles an event. And people are going to continue to watch these events and learn from each other and figure out what works. We're seeing a lot of major level events come back with just television and no fans. I mean, we're seeing that with NASCAR and PGA, and now Major League Soccer, Major League Baseball. They're figuring out their format of what their seasons are going to look like. And the NFL, is just sitting back and they're monitoring all of it, and they're figuring out what worked well for this sporting event, what didn't. I think the youth level events, we've seen those come back. Maybe not to the extent that we're used to or we're accustomed to, but those youth events are coming back with probably more local teams staying local and playing local, social distancing of the fans by removing bleachers and things like that, prepaid admission. So I think, again, to that answer, or to that question, I think it's going to be a wait and see type of approach. And I think a lot of it is going to revolve around our school districts and our colleges and our universities, and what are they able to do. We're in an area where K-State football just had to shut down because of all of the athletes that they had tested positive. And that's a small segment of a university population. What's going to happen when 30,000 students come back to that campus? So I think being cautious and looking out for yourself and taking care of yourself is so key.
So true. That's because I've been hearing about the football programs getting back, and then some of them are closing up, but then school's supposed to start. So that's going to be a big thing. Now here's one question I got prior to everything, is that as a DMO or even state or even as a sports commission, do you guys see yourselves having to rethink how you're measured? I mean, I know for us as a DMO, we're always focused on room nights and how many visitors we're bringing in, but could you guys possibly see that? I think we will. I think on a smaller level for CVBs, we're probably a little better and able to kind of refocus on things. VisitKC, a big staff, big organization. Same with the state, same with the sports commission. But we do a couple of events here as a CVB. We do the Garmin Marathon. We do Fourth Fridays, which is a big thing for our downtown area. So we're kind of engaged that way. But do you guys see maybe measurements changing? Is it not so much on room nights? Is it more on, engagement or being a more management opportunities or anything like that? Anyone?
I'll jump in and I'll be brief. For VisitKC, we're the same. We're measured on room nights, and candidly, that's a terrible measurement. It really is. It really does not reflect the work that we do. We're demand generators. We secure events and market opportunities that bring people to town, and that's a hard thing to measure. There are ways to do it, but a lot of our agreements, a lot of our contracts, a lot of our bylaws don't speak to that. So we need to. I know one thing I was even working on pre-COVID and conversations through the industry at large, through my CVB DMO peers, is transitioning to an attendance-based measurement, because just because somebody doesn't book in the official room block or something like that doesn't mean that they're not coming to town to generate economic impact. So absolutely, that's on the radar for us. And then I'm going to be looking to transition us to a much more demand generation goals versus kind of these fictional room nights that may or may not exist, and do they perform, do they not? Are people booking outside the block? It really is. It's a sloppy system. And quite frankly, kind of what I was saying before, I'm looking forward to that as being one of the outcomes of this situation.
I would agree.
I would add to that, I think from a state level, you know, we've always looked at room nights, occupancy rate, transient guest tax collections, you know, as some of our monitored, and this year you just can't look at that. That's not going to be something for 2020 that we can look at. At Kansas Tourism, we decided to do is through, right as a pandemic, as we're coming out of this and recovering, we decided to unveil a new marketing tagline and campaign. And we just started it in the last couple of weeks, very slowly. But we are really looking at engagement numbers on social media, our digital feedback, and we're not going to be able to look at just those traditional economic impact numbers that we've looked at in the past. And we are seeing right now with this new campaign, our numbers are just fantastic. And that really lets us know that people are, number one, liking the campaign, but number two, that they're really ready to get out and explore Kansas. So yes, we do have to change our measurements.
All right, Mike, you have anything? I know you guys do a lot of events, so yeah, it's probably not as much on your guys' level as on the other two, but I'm just kind of looking at some of the chat questions. I know that someone had there about enforcement of guidelines and stuff. I know that I haven't heard of anybody coming down that's like monitoring that. You know, really, we put on a couple of events. I know, just like Mike, you know, the Garmin Marathon, we followed the county guidelines, city guidelines. We just couldn't do those events. And I think for us as a CVB and a Chamber of Commerce, we just don't, we want to be good stewards of the community. We don't want to kind of press guidelines. We don't want to, you know, anybody's health, safety, or anything like that. We don't want to kind of to even impose on that and have some kind of liability for that. So I think we're just trying to follow the guidelines that are given to us by the governmental, you know, agencies. But I don't think there's really too much enforcement on that. But really,
I would add one thing, Kelly, to that. You're right. The enforcement is really at a local level. But I think one thing that we can do is we've talked a lot about bringing back that traveler confidence. And I'm seeing throughout Kansas and actually nationwide, a lot of communities who are putting some type of pledge system together that their businesses are adhering to, that says we pledge to follow the recommended CDC guidelines, or we pledge to have a safe environment for you. And I think that's really positive in helping to bring back that traveler confidence. And I think anything that local businesses can do, restaurants, hotels, that assure those visitors that this is a safe place to come and stay or visit, will go a long ways.
You bet. All right, for the sake of time, I'm just going to kind of wrap things up. But again, we want to thank our sponsors, Johnson County Community College and Enterprise Bank. Also thank our panelists. I appreciate it. I know it's always tough to ask someone to be on a panel during lunchtime. So again, I want to thank you for your time and for your expertise. And I think everything went well. We answered a lot of good questions. I think this is always really, I mean, obviously it's just very dear to my heart, but you know, travel and tourism, a lot of people don't really understand it. But I think it's always good that through the Chamber of Commerce, we get one of the lunches and a couple other events where we try to, you know, express how important travel and tourism is to its industry. And I always tell all of our elected officials that, you know, we're not the economic development team, which they always get, they seem to interact with them more, but, you know, travel and tourism, you know, and our events and everything are very, very, very not only good for the community, but it helps bring tax dollars to the community. And we're kind of the unknown guys back in the, you know, behind the scenes. But again, it's a very important, but as community leaders and everybody else that's involved, people always ask, how can they get involved? But just, you know, if you have involved with an organization or a group, or if your company's traveling here, always reach out to your local or your state, or even, you know, your DMO, and just kind of say, how can we help, or how can we bring meetings to your hotels, and how can we do things? But reach out to us. We're the travel experts locally, and you know, if your parents or families visiting, come visit ours first, and then go out and hit the area. But again, thanks everybody for joining us this afternoon. August 5th is the next BLS event, so kind of keep that on your calendar. But again, thanks to Johnson County Community College, Enterprise Bank, and thanks to our panelists. So everybody have a great day. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Kelly. Appreciate it.